I didn't expect much that day. To be honest, I'd grown used to nothing happening. My life had become a dull cycle of work, eat, sleep, repeat. I didn't mind, really. After everything I'd gone through, a quiet, uneventful life felt like a small victory. But it all changed with a letter. It came in the mail, a regular, nondescript envelope. At first glance, it looked like junk mail. Another offer for credit cards or insurance. But as I held it in my hands, something felt off. The paper was too thick, the edges too neat. There was no return address, just my name written in a sharp, precise hand. I turned it over. No stamp, no postmark. It had just appeared, dropped through my mailbox without explanation. I sat there staring at it for a moment, unsure if I should open it. But my curiosity won out, as it often does. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper, folded in thirds. I unfolded it carefully, afraid it might be something important. The letter inside was brief, but the words burned through me like fire. You don't know me, but I know everything about you. Your life, your choices, the decisions you made, the ones you regret. You thought you could escape, but you can't run from the past forever. The truth is coming for you. I blinked. The words didn't make sense. The past? Regrets? I had plenty, sure, but what did this person know about them? Who were they? I read the rest. The truth about what happened to your family is waiting for you. There's a place, a time. Don't ignore it. It's time for you to face it. You won't be able to hide anymore. The letter ended there, signed only with a symbol I didn't recognize, a circle with 3 jagged lines running through it. It wasn't a logo I had ever seen before. I felt a shiver run down my spine. The words didn't make sense. I hadn't been in contact with anyone from my past for years. The last time I saw any of them, I had left it all behind. After the divorce, I had shut myself off from everything and everyone. I didn't have a family anymore. Not the way I once had. My parents had passed away, and I hadn't spoken to my ex-wife in ages. So who could have sent this? For the next few days, I tried to shake it off. The letter had been a strange, anonymous message. Nothing more. But then, I started to notice things. Little things. I began receiving more letters. At first, they came in the same way. No return address, no postmark, just cryptic words and that same symbol. Each one was more disturbing than the last. You think you're safe, but I'm closer than you think. The truth is buried deep. You're running out of time. I was being watched, that much was clear. The letters were becoming more urgent, more threatening. And then, one night, it happened. I got another knock on the door. It was late, far too late for anyone to be visiting, especially considering that my friends had long since stopped reaching out. But the knock was insistent. My heart raced as I cautiously made my way to the door. When I opened it, I didn't expect to see who was standing there. But there, in front of me, was an officer. He looked young, but his eyes were heavy with something more than just tiredness. There was a sadness there, something darker. "Mr. Warren?" he asked, his voice surprisingly soft. I nodded, unsure of what he was getting at. "Yes, that's me. What's going on?" "I'm going to need you to come with me," he said. I froze. "What for?" "You're not in trouble," he replied quickly, but his tone suggested something more ominous. "It's about the letters." I had no idea how he knew about the letters, but the officer wasn't wasting any time. He stepped forward, as if he was expecting me to follow him. "Wait, what's going on? Why the letters?" I asked, my mind spinning. The officer turned to me, his face unreadable. "We found something. Something that you need to see." I followed the officer to his car in silence, trying to make sense of what was happening. My mind was racing. Who had been sending the letters? What did they know? And why was I being dragged into this? As we drove through the city, my thoughts kept circling back to one thing. My ex-wife, Rachel. The woman I had spent years with. The woman who had once been the center of my world. She had walked away without a word, without even a glance back. But the more I thought about it, the more the questions piled up. Had she known something? Had she been involved in whatever this was? The officer's car pulled into a small, run-down building near the edge of town. I had no idea where we were, but it was clear we weren't anywhere near a police station. The officer didn't say anything as we walked through the dimly lit corridors of the building, leading me to a room at the back. Inside, there were a few files on a table, papers scattered across the room. "What is all this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The officer didn't answer right away. Instead, he handed me a file. I opened it, my hands trembling. Inside, there was a photograph of Rachel, taken not long before we had separated. But the real shock came when I flipped the page. There was another photo, and this one was of a baby I didn't recognize. The officer finally spoke, his voice serious. "We need to know if you recognize this child." I stared at the photo, my heart pounding. It was the last thing I had expected. What was going on? And how did this all connect to me? I stood there in that dimly lit room, staring at the photo in my hands. The officer didn't say a word as I flipped through the pages of the file. It felt like an eternity, my mind spinning as I tried to make sense of what I was looking at. The first photo was of Rachel, my ex-wife. She looked just as she had when I last saw her. That sharp, confident gaze that used to reassure me, a reminder of a woman I thought I knew inside and out. But the second photo was what stopped me in my tracks. The baby. It was a little girl, maybe a year old. Big eyes, a faint smile. Nothing unusual, nothing too distinct. But the more I looked at it, the more something gnawed at the back of my mind. Something about her face, the way she looked at the camera. I felt like I had seen those eyes before, even though I knew it was impossible. I put the photo down slowly, trying to process the sudden onslaught of questions. The officer was watching me carefully, but I couldn't bring myself to meet his eyes. I felt a cold sweat form on the back of my neck. "What is this?" I finally managed to say, my voice shaky. "Who is this child?" The officer stepped forward, his face grim. "That's what we need to find out. You've been receiving letters, correct?" I nodded, my throat dry. "Yes, but how do you know about them?" He didn't answer directly. Instead, he flipped open another folder, this one thicker, filled with documents, police reports, and several more photographs. He laid them on the table in front of me. "These letters," he said, "aren't just random. They're connected to a much larger investigation, and you're part of it." The words hung in the air like a thick fog, and I felt my stomach drop. Connected to an investigation? What could I possibly have to do with any of this? The officer continued. "We've been investigating a series of incidents involving anonymous letters and disturbing messages over the past year. A number of people, including some close to you, have been involved, but no one has been able to make the connection. Until now." I stared at him, trying to piece it together. "But I'm not involved in any investigation. I don't know anything about this child. I haven't even seen Rachel in years." My voice was desperate now. I needed him to understand. I was just a guy trying to live a quiet life, far removed from whatever this was. The officer sighed. "That's the part that's so strange. You say you haven't been involved, but everything we've uncovered points to you. The letters, the child, the connection to Rachel, they all seem to trace back to you." I felt like I was drowning in questions, the pieces of a puzzle I couldn't solve. Rachel had always been complicated, and our divorce had been messy, but this was something else entirely. Why was she involved in something like this? What kind of life had she been living after we parted ways? Who was the child? I asked again, my voice barely a whisper. The officer leaned in, his eyes locking onto mine. "That's the part we don't know, but we have reason to believe that this baby is yours." My breath caught in my throat. "What? That's impossible." "We've checked," he said, flipping through more paperwork. "We've matched the DNA from the letters, and it's linked to you. We're still trying to figure out how, but it's clear this child is somehow connected to you, Adam." My mind was reeling. How could this be happening? I hadn't been with anyone in over a year. Hell, I hadn't even considered dating anyone since Rachel left. There was no way I had a child out there, especially not one I had no knowledge of. The officer's voice broke through my spiraling thoughts. "I know this is hard to understand, but you need to come with us. We're taking you to the hospital. The child, well, we need to make sure she's safe. We think Rachel may have left her there for a reason." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to argue, to tell him this was some kind of mistake, but the reality was too heavy for my mind to deny. There was a child, a baby, and Rachel was somehow involved. I couldn't even comprehend it. The drive to the hospital was quiet, but it wasn't peaceful. The weight of the situation was suffocating, each passing second making the questions grow louder in my mind. Was this a trap? Was Rachel trying to manipulate me again? It wouldn't be the first time. She was good at making me question myself, at twisting the truth until I didn't know what was real. But why a child? What did she want from me now? We arrived at the hospital, and the officer led me down a long hallway, his footsteps echoing in the silence. He didn't speak, but his presence was a constant reminder that I wasn't in control of this situation. I followed him into a small room at the end of the corridor, and there, lying in a crib, was the baby. I froze in the doorway. She was so small, so vulnerable, and yet, there was something familiar about her. Her eyes, that same dark gaze from the photo, watched me as if she knew me. It was the strangest feeling, like a memory I couldn't place. My heart raced as I took a step forward, drawn to her, even though I had no idea who she was. The officer handed me a file. "We have her DNA results," he said. "We need your confirmation." I opened the file, and sure enough, there was the truth I hadn't been prepared for. The baby's DNA matched mine. There was no question about it. She was mine. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. Everything I had built for myself after the divorce had just crumbled in a single instant. "How?" was all I could manage to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. The officer shook his head, looking just as confused as I felt. "We're still investigating that. But we have one lead. The letters you've been receiving, they were written by someone close to you. Someone who wanted you to know the truth. It's clear that whoever this person is, they've been keeping tabs on you for a long time." I looked at the baby again. She was mine. And now, I was facing a truth I hadn't even known existed. "Rachel," I muttered under my breath. I didn't want to say it out loud, but I had no other explanation. Rachel had to be involved. She had to know something, or she was hiding something, and I was about to find out exactly what that was. I stared at the baby in the crib, my thoughts a tangled mess. The world had shifted beneath me, and every familiar thing I thought I knew had become a lie. The small room around me felt suffocating, as though the walls were closing in. This couldn't be happening. It couldn't. The DNA test confirmed it. She was mine. But how? Why? I barely recognized the sensation creeping through my chest. It wasn't just confusion. It was fear. Fear of what I might uncover. The officer, still standing in the doorway, seemed to sense my disorientation. He cleared his throat and stepped forward. "I know this is overwhelming, Mr. Harris, but we need to get answers. We're close. We just need your help." I barely heard him. My mind was miles away, running through scenarios I never imagined. I hadn't spoken to Rachel in 2 years. 2 years. There was no way she had a child with me and never told me. That would mean she had kept a huge secret from me. But how was it possible that I had a child I didn't even know about? "What do you mean, help?" I finally managed to ask. My voice was barely audible, a strange mix of disbelief and something darker that I couldn't quite place. "We need to get to Rachel," the officer said, his voice calm but urgent. "We think she's in hiding, but we need your cooperation. She's the key to understanding what's going on. We have reason to believe that she's involved in something much larger than we first realized." I felt my pulse quicken. Involved in what? What are you talking about? My head was spinning. This wasn't just about a child. This was something far deeper, far darker. And I was in the middle of it, without even knowing how or why. The officer looked around the small room for a moment before locking eyes with me. "I know this is hard to process, Mr. Harris, but I need to ask you to come with us. We're going to need your full cooperation. You may be the only person who can help us find Rachel before it's too late." I shook my head, trying to clear the fog in my brain. "How can I help you find her? I don't even know where she is. I haven't heard from her in 2 years." "That's the thing," he said quietly. "We think she's been in contact with you this whole time. Through the letters. We believe she's using them to lead you to something she's been hiding." I felt my throat tighten. The letters. They were her. It had all started with those strange, cryptic messages. I hadn't wanted to believe it at first, but the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Rachel was behind all of this. She was the one who had been pulling the strings. I thought about the last time I saw her, how angry I had been when she walked away without even a second thought. I hadn't known it at the time, but that moment, that betrayal, was just the beginning of something bigger, something I was now wrapped up in. Why didn't she tell me? I whispered. I wasn't asking the officer. I was asking myself. Why keep this from me? The officer didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked over to the crib where the baby was still lying, her small chest rising and falling with each peaceful breath. "We don't have all the answers yet, but we're trying to piece things together," he said. "There's a reason she's been hiding this. But you need to understand something, Mr. Harris. Rachel is a part of something much bigger than herself. This isn't just about you or her. It's about a group, a network that has been operating under the radar for years." I was barely following. A network? What does that have to do with me? The officer turned back to me, his eyes intense. Everything. We believe Rachel was coerced into being part of this group. They've been using her, manipulating her. The baby, she's the result of something bigger. A mistake, maybe. But the fact that you're connected to all of this means you're in danger, too. My stomach churned at the thought. Danger? From what? Before the officer could answer, the door to the room creaked open, and another officer entered. This one was younger, his face pale, his eyes wide with alarm. "Sir, we found something," he said, his voice urgent. I felt my pulse race. "What is it?" The officer looked directly at me. "We found Rachel. She's been holed up at an abandoned house on the outskirts of town. But we're too late. She's gone. We think she's left something behind, though. Something that could explain everything." Without thinking, I rushed out of the room, my feet pounding against the cold floor. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but I couldn't stand there anymore. I had to know the truth. I had to find Rachel. The officers followed me as we rushed out to their cars, the urgency of the situation pressing down on me like a weight. I could hear my breath in my chest, ragged and fast. My thoughts were all over the place, but one thing was clear. Rachel was involved in something far darker than I could have imagined, and I was tangled up in it. We arrived at the house in less than 30 minutes. It was a dilapidated, two-story structure at the edge of town. The windows were boarded up, and the yard was overgrown with weeds. The place looked abandoned, but I knew better. I had no idea what I was about to walk into, but I couldn't turn back now. The officers moved quickly, clearing the perimeter before entering the house. My heart pounded as I followed them inside, the dim light from a flickering flashlight casting long shadows on the walls. The smell of mildew and decay hit me immediately, and I felt a chill crawl down my spine. We made our way through the house, searching every room, but there was no sign of Rachel. My mind raced. Where was she? What had she left behind? In the back room, one of the officers called out to me, "Mr. Harris, over here." I walked toward the officer, my legs trembling as I approached. There, on the floor, was a large envelope. I bent down and picked it up, my hands shaking. It was addressed to me, my name scrawled across the front in the same familiar handwriting from the letters. I opened it carefully, my heart in my throat. Inside was a single piece of paper. It was covered in symbols and strange markings, none of which I recognized. But one word was written in bold letters at the top. Truth. The officer stepped closer. "This is it. This is what we've been looking for." I looked at the paper in my hands, feeling the weight of it settle in my chest. This wasn't just about Rachel anymore. This was about something much larger. And the truth, whatever it was something I wasn't ready to face. But there was no turning back now. The deeper I went, the more I realized. I was already caught in something much bigger than I could ever have imagined. And Rachel wasn't the only one hiding something. I stood there, holding the envelope in my hands, my mind reeling from the discovery. The room felt like it was closing in on me, the flickering light casting eerie shadows on the walls. The officer beside me shifted uneasily, clearly waiting for me to make the first move, but I was frozen in place, staring at the strange symbols and the single word at the top of the paper, truth. For a long moment, all I could do was stare at it, my mind spinning, trying to make sense of what this all meant. The truth? What truth? I had no idea what I was dealing with, but I knew this wasn't just some random series of events. The letters, the baby, the police involvement, none of it made sense, and yet here I was, holding a piece of something that could change everything. The officer beside me shifted again, clearing his throat. "Mr. Harris, do you recognize any of these symbols?" he asked, his voice more urgent now, more insistent. I looked at him, trying to snap out of the fog that had descended over me. I scanned the page again, studying the markings. There were lines, circles, odd geometric shapes, and nothing that looked familiar. But I could feel it. This wasn't just random scribbles. These were intentional, deliberate symbols. They were a language, a code. Someone had written this knowing that it would mean something to me. "No," I answered slowly, shaking my head. "I've never seen anything like this." The officer let out a quiet sigh of frustration. "We've been tracking this group for months, Mr. Harris. These symbols are part of something much larger, something that's been operating in the shadows for years. We think Rachel was involved with them. We believe she's been trying to break free, but..." He trailed off, looking as if he was trying to find the right words. But why me? I asked, feeling a rising sense of panic. What does this have to do with me? Why would Rachel drag me into this? The officer didn't answer right away, his gaze flickering over the symbols as if searching for something. He finally spoke, his voice quieter this time. That's what we need to figure out. We think you're more connected to this than you realize. Rachel wasn't just hiding from these people. She was trying to protect you. I could feel my heart begin to race again. Protect me? From what? The officer didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, pulling out another file from his jacket. This one was thicker, the pages yellowed and marked with red ink. We've been able to trace some of Rachel's movements. We found out she was in contact with someone from her past, someone who had ties to this group. I stared at the file, my eyes scanning the page. The name that stood out to me was Victor Drake. I didn't recognize it, but something about it sent a chill through me. I turned the page, but before I could read any further, the officer spoke again. Victor Drake is one of the key players in this organization. He's been working from behind the scenes for years, manipulating people, pulling the strings. We think Rachel was trying to stop him, but she couldn't. And now, it's clear he's connected to you. My pulse quickened. Victor Drake. The name felt like it was seared into my brain. Something about it was familiar, but I couldn't place it. Had I heard it before? Had Rachel ever mentioned it? I felt like I was on the edge of something huge, something dangerous, and yet I was still in the dark. I was snapped from my thoughts when the officer's voice interrupted. Mr. Harris, we think Rachel was trying to protect you from this man. We believe she left you the letters, trying to send you a warning. But it's clear now that she didn't have much time left. She was trying to piece things together, and we think you're the key. I turned the paper over in my hands, the symbols staring back at me. I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me now. This wasn't just about Rachel anymore. It was about something much larger, a secret world that was operating right under my nose, and somehow, I had been dragged into it. Why didn't she just tell me? I asked, more to myself than to the officer. Why all the cryptic messages? Why all the secrecy? The officer looked at me, his face softening for the first time. Because, Mr. Harris, if she had told you everything, you would have been in even greater danger. Rachel knew how deep this went. She knew if she involved you directly, they would come after you, too. I swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking in. I had thought my life had been difficult after the divorce. I had thought I was just trying to get over the betrayal, trying to rebuild. But now I saw the truth. Rachel had been trying to protect me all along, and I hadn't even realized it. We were interrupted by a loud bang coming from upstairs, followed by muffled voices. The officer immediately tensed, his hand reaching for the radio clipped to his chest. Stay here, he ordered, his voice sharp. We'll check it out. I didn't have time to protest. The officer darted up the stairs, his footsteps echoing in the old house. I stood frozen, the file still clutched tightly in my hands, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't just wait for answers. I had to know what was going on. I moved toward the door, feeling a sense of urgency building inside me. But before I could make it, another officer appeared in the hallway, his face grim. Sir, he said, you need to see this. I followed him without a word, my heart racing. We moved quickly through the dark, narrow halls, until we reached the room at the back of the house. The officer opened the door, revealing a small, cluttered space. But it wasn't the room that caught my attention. It was the large metal box in the corner. This was found hidden under the floorboards, the officer said, his voice low. We think it's something Rachel left behind. I approached the box cautiously, my pulse pounding in my ears. There was a lock on it, but it didn't seem like it would be too difficult to break open. The officer handed me a crowbar, and I hesitated for a moment before prying the lid open. Inside was a pile of papers, old photographs, and files. But the one thing that stood out among them was a small, leather-bound notebook. I could feel the weight of it, like it held the answers to everything I had been searching for. I opened the notebook slowly, my hands shaking. The first page was filled with scribbled notes, words that seemed to be a jumble of thoughts. But as I flipped through, it became clearer. There were names, dates, locations, and at the end of the notebook, in bold letters, were the words, "The truth will find you, but it comes at a cost." I closed the book, my mind reeling. I had no idea what I was about to uncover, but it was clear I was already in too deep. Whatever this was, it was no longer just about Rachel or me. It was about a network, a conspiracy, and a truth that I wasn't ready to face. But there was no going back now, and I was beginning to realize that the cost of this truth was going to be far higher than I ever imagined. I couldn't put the notebook down. The small leather-bound book sat heavy in my hands as I turned its pages, each one revealing more fragments of a story that seemed to slip through my fingers the more I tried to grasp it. I skimmed over the jumbled notes, names that meant nothing to me, locations I didn't recognize, but one thing stood out among the rest. A series of cryptic messages, almost like a road map, a map I was supposed to follow. The truth is buried beneath layers of lies, but it will come to the surface when the time is right. I couldn't help but shiver as I read the words. The time is right. Had Rachel known what was going to happen? Had she been trying to tell me all along? Every entry in that notebook seemed like a puzzle piece, but nothing about it made sense. There were too many unanswered questions, too many things I couldn't piece together. I wasn't sure how long I had been standing there, holding the notebook, but the sound of footsteps snapped me out of my daze. I turned to find one of the officers from earlier approaching, his face pale, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Harris," he said in a low voice, "you need to come with us. There's been a development." I felt the chill run down my spine again. "What kind of development?" I asked, my voice tight. I didn't want to go anywhere. I didn't want to leave the room. I wanted to stay, to figure this out. "We found something," he repeated, more urgently this time. "Something you need to see." Without waiting for a response, he turned and headed toward the stairs. I had no choice but to follow him. My mind was still reeling, the notebook heavy in my hands, but I couldn't let go of it. It felt like the key to everything, even though I didn't know what the lock was. We made our way out of the house and into one of the officers' cars. The drive was silent, the night air thick with tension. I could feel my heart racing in my chest, my thoughts racing ahead of me, jumping from one horrifying possibility to the next. What had they found? Was it another clue? Or something much worse? The officer didn't speak until we arrived at a nondescript building on the outskirts of town. The place was dark, abandoned-looking, but there was something about it that made my stomach drop. "We think this is connected to the group Rachel was trying to get away from," the officer said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We've been tracking them for months, but we couldn't make the connection until recently. This building was one of their safe houses." I looked at the building, unease bubbling inside me. This wasn't just about Rachel anymore. It wasn't just about the letters or the baby. This was about something much bigger, and I was being dragged deeper into it with every passing moment. The officer led me into the building, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. It smelled of dampness and decay, and the air was thick with dust. The place had clearly been abandoned for years, yet it felt like it was still holding on to something, like it had a memory of all the things that had happened there. We reached a room in the back of the building. The officer opened the door, and what I saw inside made my blood run cold. The room was empty except for a single, metal filing cabinet. The officer walked toward it and pulled open one of the drawers. Inside were dozens of files, each one labeled with a name. My heart skipped a beat when I saw one of the names, Rachel Harris. I moved closer, my hands shaking as I reached for the file. The officer didn't stop me. "It's yours now," he said quietly. "But there's more." I opened the file, my eyes scanning the documents. There were photographs, more of the same cryptic symbols, and pages filled with writing that didn't make any sense. But then I found a photo that stopped me cold. It was of Rachel, but this time, she wasn't alone. In the picture, she was standing with a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, dressed in a dark suit, his face cold and expressionless. There was something about his gaze that made my skin crawl. I flipped through the pages, feeling the blood drain from my face. The man's name was Victor Drake, and it looked like he had been working with Rachel. They were part of the same organization. I felt sick to my stomach. Rachel had been involved with him. She had been in danger this whole time, and I had no idea. "Who is this guy?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The officer didn't respond immediately, but when he did, his words were heavy with the weight of years of investigation. "Victor Drake is one of the highest-ranking members of a clandestine organization. They've been operating under the radar for years, controlling things from behind the scenes. They deal with anything from money laundering to illegal trafficking. You name it. They've got their hands in every dirty operation. And Rachel was a part of it." I stood frozen, the files in my hands shaking. This couldn't be happening. Rachel, the woman I had loved, had been involved with people like this. The betrayal felt deeper than I had ever imagined. And now, I was wrapped up in it. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Rachel had never left me. She had been trying to protect me. She had been trying to shield me from this, from Victor Drake and everything he represented. And the baby? I asked, my voice thick with confusion. How does she fit into all of this? The officer didn't meet my eyes. He paused for a moment, like he was debating how much to say. Finally, he spoke. We think the child is the key to everything. Rachel had been trying to find a way to take down this organization. She thought the baby might be the leverage she needed, but we're not sure why. I could feel my chest tightening as I processed the officer's words. The baby. Rachel had tried to use her own child as a bargaining chip to bring down a dangerous criminal network. That was why she had left me, why she had kept everything from me. She had thought she could protect me by pushing me away, but in doing so, she had pulled me into a world I couldn't escape from. I glanced at the officer, my mind a whirlwind of questions. What happens now? I asked. What do I do with all of this? The officer's face was grim. Now, we find Rachel, and we bring down Victor Drake. I felt a cold chill settle over me. I had no idea how this was going to end, but one thing was clear. I was in this fight whether I liked it or not. The truth had already come for me, and there was no going back. The web had tightened around me, and I was caught in its center. There was no way out now, but I had to keep going. For Rachel, for the baby, for whatever this was, the truth that I couldn't walk away from. The room was cold, and I felt a sense of unease settle deep in my bones as I stood there, staring at the files, the photographs, and the fragmented pieces of a puzzle that were starting to form a picture I wasn't prepared for. Everything I had believed, everything I thought I knew about Rachel, my past, and the life I had been rebuilding, was now thrown into chaos. The officer standing next to me seemed just as affected by the gravity of the situation, though he had years of training to hide it. But even he couldn't mask the urgency in his eyes. I had always prided myself on being a calm, rational person. I dealt with problems head-on, never shying away from the truth, no matter how hard it was. But what I was looking at now, what I was getting pulled into, was beyond comprehension. Rachel wasn't just a victim of betrayal, and neither was I. We had both been pawns in a game so vast, so dangerous, that neither of us could have possibly understood the full scope of it. I think you should see this, the officer said, pulling me back from my thoughts. He handed me another set of photographs. I glanced at them, my stomach twisting. They weren't new, but the significance of them was starting to sink in. It was Rachel, and she was meeting with Victor Drake, the man who I had now learned was the orchestrator of an underground network of criminals, corrupt officials, and far-reaching conspiracies. In the photos, Rachel didn't look like a victim. She looked like someone who was playing a role, a part in a dangerous game. Rachel was never just trying to protect you. The officer continued, his voice steady but filled with a gravity that sent a chill through me. She was playing both sides. She had information that could destroy this whole operation, but she was never in control. Victor Drake and his people, they had their claws in her from the very beginning. I felt my hands tremble slightly as I stared at the photos. Victor Drake. The name sounded almost like a myth now. He had seemed so distant, so impossible, like a figure from a story. But now that I knew his face, the reality hit harder than anything else. He wasn't just a villain in the shadows. He was everywhere. And Rachel had been caught in the web he'd spun. But it wasn't just the photos that haunted me. It was the implications. Rachel had been in deeper than I could have ever known. She hadn't been innocent. She hadn't been solely trying to protect me. She had been involved in things I couldn't even begin to understand. And now, I was being dragged into the same storm. You're telling me she chose to be part of this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The shock was settling in now, thickening my words. The officer nodded, his eyes hard. She didn't have much of a choice. Victor Drake and his group are ruthless. But she also wasn't completely innocent. Rachel had her reasons, but we believe she was trying to use her position to bring them down. It's why she left you. She didn't want to drag you into this, but it's too late now. I wanted to argue, to defend her, but I couldn't. The evidence was right in front of me, and I had no choice but to accept it. Rachel had been playing a dangerous game, and she had pushed me away to protect me. Or at least, that's what she thought. But now, the truth was clear. I had been a part of her plan all along. I had just been too blind to see it. We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of everything pressing down on me like 1,000 tons. The officer seemed to sense my thoughts, his voice cutting through the thick air. "We need to move quickly," he said, looking at his watch. "Victor Drake is aware of our investigation, and he's going to make his next move soon. We're not the only ones looking for Rachel. He's coming after her, and after you." I nodded, trying to absorb his words. "What do you mean, coming after me?" I asked, my voice low, laced with fear I couldn't quite hide. "I didn't ask for any of this. I don't even know how I'm involved. I've just been following the breadcrumbs she left behind." The officer's face hardened. "You're involved because you're the key. Rachel knew that. The baby, the fact that it's yours, it's more than just a coincidence. This whole operation is linked to her, but now, it's linked to you too. Victor Drake isn't going to let that go. He's ruthless. If he gets to you, he'll use you to get to her. He'll use you to bury the truth." I felt a shiver run through me. I wasn't just a bystander anymore. I wasn't just some guy caught in a mess because of a woman's past. I was part of the puzzle now, and I had no idea what the pieces meant. As we made our way to the car, I couldn't stop thinking about Rachel, about the woman I had once loved. What had she done? What had she become? And why hadn't she told me? There were so many unanswered questions swirling in my mind, but now there was no time to find the answers. We drove in silence, the city passing by in a blur. My thoughts were too loud, too chaotic. Victor Drake wasn't just a name anymore. He was coming. The threat wasn't just some far-off possibility. It was real. And whatever Rachel had been trying to do, whatever plan she had set in motion, it was far from over. When we arrived at the hideout, the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. There were several cars parked outside, their engines humming quietly in the night. The officer motioned for me to stay close as we approached the building. "I'll go first," he said, signaling for the other officers to follow him. I nodded, feeling my pulse quicken. The truth was closer than ever. But so was the danger. Every step I took now led me further down a path that I couldn't escape from. There was no turning back. As we approached the door, I felt a sudden pang of dread. What would we find inside? Would Rachel be there? Or would Victor Drake be waiting for us, ready to silence everything? The officer reached for his gun, signaling me to stay behind him. And then, with one swift motion, the door was kicked open. What we found inside wasn't what I expected. The room was completely empty. There were no signs of struggle, no signs of life. But as I stepped forward, something caught my eye. A single note was pinned to the wall, the handwriting unmistakable. It was Rachel's. "I'm sorry. It's too late now. He's coming for you. Don't trust anyone." I felt my blood run cold as I read the words over and over again. This wasn't over. It had only just begun. The note pinned to the wall trembled in my hands as I read it again. "I'm sorry. It's too late now. He's coming for you. Don't trust anyone." Rachel's handwriting was unmistakable, even in the haze of panic that gripped me. I felt the coldness of her words sink deep into my bones, a chill that spread out through my entire body. I hadn't expected this. I hadn't expected her to leave me a clue or a warning. But now it was clear. She was still out there. And Victor Drake was hunting me. "Don't trust anyone," I whispered to myself, the words echoing in my head. I turned to the officer standing beside me. His face was grim as he examined the note, his eyes scanning the room for any other signs of life. "What do you think this means?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "It means she's gone," the officer said flatly, his voice heavy with understanding. "Rachel didn't just leave us a clue. She left you a warning. She knew what was coming. She knew Drake was getting closer, and she didn't want you caught in the middle. But she also knew she couldn't protect you any longer. Whatever plan she was working on, whatever she was trying to uncover, it's over now." I stared at the note, trying to make sense of it. If Rachel was trying to protect me, why hadn't she told me everything? Why had she kept me in the dark for so long? The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. She had dragged me into this mess, into her secret life, without giving me the full picture. She had left me to deal with the consequences of her actions without any understanding of what was really at stake. And now, I was paying the price. I shoved the note into my jacket pocket, my mind racing. There was no time to waste. I had to find her. I had to understand what she had been running from and why. But most of all, I had to protect myself. If I was going to survive this, I needed answers. And I wasn't going to get them standing here. "We need to move," I said, my voice hard. "Victor Drake is out there. and we don't know how much time we have." The officer nodded, his face unreadable. He had been doing this for years, dealing with dangerous criminals and shady organizations. But something about this case, something about the way Rachel's name kept coming up, made even him uneasy. He glanced at the other officers, who were still searching the house, and then turned back to me. "I agree," he said quietly. "But we need to be careful. Drake isn't someone you just find and take down. He's always one step ahead. He's had eyes on Rachel for a long time, and now that you're involved, he'll be watching you too." I nodded. I didn't need to be reminded. I could feel the weight of it now, pressing down on me like a vice. My every move would be under surveillance. Rachel's warning echoed in my mind again. Don't trust anyone. The officers packed up, leaving the room in silence, as I turned over the events in my head. Every piece of the puzzle I thought I had was slipping through my fingers. I was a part of something bigger now, something dangerous, and there was no escape. As we piled into the cars, I couldn't shake the feeling that Rachel had known more than she was letting on. She had been a part of this world, this shadowy underworld, for longer than I had imagined. She wasn't just a victim, she was a player in the game. And now, I was a pawn. It was too late to walk away. We headed toward the outskirts of town, following leads that felt like they were disintegrating the moment we chased them. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how little I knew. What had Rachel been involved in? What had she been trying to uncover? As we approached a rundown warehouse at the edge of town, the tension in the car was palpable. I could feel the anxiety thrumming in the air, and even the officers, who were usually stoic in the face of danger, seemed on edge. Something didn't feel right. I could sense it. We were walking into a trap. We pulled up to the warehouse, the dark outline of the building looming ahead like a bad omen. The night was thick with fog, and the air felt heavy. The place looked abandoned, but I wasn't fooled. I had learned by now that nothing was what it seemed. The officers and I approached cautiously, our steps muffled by the wet ground. We checked the surroundings, weapons drawn, ready for anything. It felt like every move I made was being watched, like someone was waiting for us to make a mistake. "We go in slow," the officer said, his voice barely a whisper. "We don't know what we're walking into. Stay alert." We entered through a side door, the creak of the hinges echoing through the empty space. Inside, it was darker than I had expected. The warehouse was empty, except for scattered debris and rusting machinery. But there was something off about it. It didn't feel like an abandoned building. It felt like a place where people came and went, where secrets were hidden. The officers signaled for the team to split up. We moved carefully through the warehouse, each of us checking corners, scanning every inch for something, anything that could give us a lead. I stayed close to the officer, my heart hammering in my chest. My mind raced. What if Rachel had been here? What if this was where she had been hiding? As we moved deeper into the building, I caught sight of something in the corner of my eye. A flash of light. I froze, my pulse racing. I wasn't sure what it was, but I knew it was no coincidence. I wasn't alone. I motioned for the officer to follow me as I stepped cautiously toward the source of the light. It was coming from a small room off to the side. The door cracked just enough to reveal a faint glow from within. The officer and I approached the door, the tension rising with each step. I could feel the weight of everything that had led me here, the danger, the deception, the tangled web of lies that I was now a part of. We pushed the door open slowly, my breath catching in my throat as the room came into focus. It was a small, dimly lit office, and sitting in the center of it, at a desk, was Rachel. My heart skipped a beat as I stepped into the room. Rachel looked up, her face pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and relief. "I knew you'd come," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "But it's too late. He's already here." Before I could respond, the door slammed shut behind us, and I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching from the hallway. Victor Drake had found us. The door slammed shut behind us, the sound reverberating through the small, dimly lit room like a gunshot. My heart skipped a beat, and I turned instinctively to look at Rachel. She was sitting there, her face drawn and tired, but her eyes still held the defiance that had always been there. She wasn't the same woman I had known, but she was still fighting, and that was something. "Victor's coming," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You need to get out of here, Adam. It's not safe. You're not ready for this." But I wasn't going anywhere. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. "I'm not leaving you." I said firmly, stepping closer. I'm not running. Not again. She looked at me for a long moment, as if weighing the words, before her gaze softened. I never wanted this for you, she said quietly. I never wanted to drag you into my world. But now, we don't have a choice. If we want to survive, we need to stop him. I nodded. There was no more running. I'd been running from the truth for too long, from the past, from her, from the mess that had become my life. But now, standing here with her, everything felt different. We had one chance, and we were going to take it together. The sound of footsteps grew louder outside the room, and I could feel the tension building. I glanced at the officer, who had been standing in the doorway, waiting for my decision. He nodded to me, signaling that we were out of time. Do you have a plan? I asked Rachel, my mind racing. We didn't have much time to come up with something solid, but we had to try. Rachel stood up slowly, her expression hardening with determination. I've been keeping something from you, she said, pulling open a drawer on the desk. There's a safe in the back of this building. It's where I've been keeping the information on Victor, on everything. If we get to it, we can take him down. I felt a surge of hope. We can stop him. Rachel met my gaze, her eyes full of fear, but also something else. Hope. We can. Without another word, we moved swiftly, dodging the creaky floorboards and the scattered debris as we made our way toward the back of the building. The officers were already taking positions, trying to block off all possible exits. But there was still a chance we could beat Drake to the safe. We reached the back of the building, and Rachel led the way, pulling open a hidden door behind a stack of crates. Inside, a small room awaited, dimly lit but lined with filing cabinets and old, dusty boxes. She quickly crossed the room and knelt before a metal panel embedded in the wall, pulling out a set of keys from her pocket. Her fingers trembled as she inserted the key into the hidden lock. You sure you want to do this? I asked, my voice tense with urgency. Once we open that safe, there's no turning back. Rachel nodded, her expression resolute. I have no choice. Neither do you. With a soft click, the metal panel slid open, revealing a small, secure safe tucked inside. Rachel hurriedly punched in the combination and pulled the door open. Inside were stacks of papers, files, and a flash drive. She pulled out the flash drive and handed it to me. This contains everything. The proof we need to bring Victor down. He's been operating for years, and we have everything on him. Every transaction, every deal, everything. I felt a sense of relief wash over me as I took the drive, but it was short-lived. The sound of footsteps in the hallway grew louder, and I could tell that Victor Drake's men were closing in. We don't have much time, I said, urgency in my voice. We need to get this to the police, now. Rachel's eyes met mine, and for the first time in a long while, I saw a glimmer of hope in them. We will. But first, we need to get out of here. With no time to waste, we made our way back toward the main building. But just as we rounded the corner, we were confronted by two of Drake's men. They stood in the doorway, guns drawn, blocking our escape. My heart raced, and I could feel the weight of the flash drive in my pocket like a ticking time bomb. Rachel stepped forward, her voice calm but steady. We're not leaving without this information. You can either step aside, or we can do this the hard way. The men exchanged glances, clearly unsure of how to handle the situation. But Rachel wasn't waiting for their hesitation. She moved with precision, grabbing a nearby metal pipe and swinging it with all her strength. It caught one of the men in the side, knocking him off balance. The other lunged at her, but I was quicker, grabbing him by the arm and twisting it behind his back until he dropped his weapon. Go, I shouted to Rachel. We have to move. With the two men incapacitated, we rushed toward the exit, hearts pounding in our chests. The police were already outside, and as we burst through the door, the officers rushed forward, ready to take control of the situation. Victor Drake's network was crumbling, piece by piece. With the evidence from the safe, we were able to expose his entire operation, from money laundering to human trafficking, and the authorities moved quickly to dismantle it. The police arrested Drake's associates, and within hours, he was in custody. As I stood there, watching the police cart away the criminals, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. It was over. The nightmare was finally over. I turned to Rachel, who was standing beside me, her expression weary but content. We did it, she said softly, her voice a little hoarse. I nodded, feeling the weight of everything lift off my shoulders. Yeah, we did. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel the weight of the past pressing down on me. There were still unanswered questions, still pieces of the puzzle left to figure out, but I wasn't alone anymore. Rachel and I had been through hell and back, but we had come out the other side. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to believe in the possibility of a fresh start. We had won. Together.